Alright, it's time for an update and forecast on the Mosquito Fire. Throughout this video, we're just going to try to figure out where some of that growth was today, and then look at the weather conditions to see what kind of growth we can expect tomorrow. So right there, that just gives you a good snapshot of the Mosquito Fire, the two areas of the fire that have been active. Yesterday was the big story that we had that spot fire that rushed up towards Forest Hill. We'll talk plenty about that. And then on that eastern side, that looks to be the side of the fire where we had the most activity today, which makes sense because we were talking about yesterday those southwesterly winds. We're just going to be trying to push this fire towards the northeast. Now, best place to start is always just looking at the satellite imagery because you can tell how active the fire was. First thing that I notice is that hot spot, which you can kind of see at the very beginning of the video, didn't look very active throughout the day today. Barely any smoke coming off of it at all. It's clearly that eastern section of the fire that had the most smoke production. And then you notice a few of those white puffs right there where we get some of those bigger smoke plumes popping up. Now if we want to actually see those smoke plumes from the ground, this is the eastern side of the fire. You notice every once in a while you just get one little puff of that smoke column punching through right here. Overall though, I wouldn't say it's as active as it was yesterday, and it certainly isn't as active as it was when we were in the peak of the heat wave and we had the triple digit temperatures. Today, we actually just had below average temperatures. Relative humidity was, in some cases, it didn't even go down below 40%. So overall, pretty good conditions. We just had those strong southwesterly winds today, which is why this eastern side was as active as it was. Main spot that I was watching though throughout the day today was that hot spot because it came very close to Forest Hill yesterday, and we'll look at exactly how close it came in just a moment. But first I just want to point out that barely any smoke coming off of it today. Yesterday, that was how it looked when it started off, and then it quickly grew to a few hundred acres. We had a huge smoke plume coming off, and doesn't look like we had all that much growth when it comes to that spot fire today. Now when it comes to the growth on the fire though, we are up to 63,776 acres, and now we can actually try to see where some of that growth was. So this is this morning's data, so we don't exactly know where the majority of the growth was today. We'll just have to wait until the next flight and tomorrow morning's Wildfire Insider video to figure that out. But here you can just get an idea of where the majority of the growth has been recently. And since we talked last, it doesn't look like there's been that much changes around Forest Hill. So again, what happened down here, can click in here. Yesterday we had one of these burning embers on this side of Middle Fork American River jump over to this side, and then you get those up canyon winds during the day. You can see there's also a lot of fuel in this area, and that was where yesterday that spot fire quickly grew to a few hundred acres and basically just took off towards Forest Hill. Now this is where some of the good news comes in though. If you notice where this spot fire was able to reach to, they were able to stop it before it got to Forest Hill High School right here, and then also just stop it before it went into what looks to be hundreds of structures around Forest Hill itself. So that was some amazing work done by the wildland personnel to stop that in its place, and it looks like we continue to make that great progress today on calming down that spot fire. Most of that growth again towards the eastern section of the fire. Now when it comes to containment, that looks like it's still at about 20% right there. Figure out where that containment is. It's mostly on the southern edge of this fire, and that's actually some good news because that was an area that we were worried about previously. Around that southern edge, if we turn on structures, you can see how close the fire came to a lot of those structures. But the good news is we really haven't seen any activity there recently, which kind of makes sense because we've mostly had southwesterly winds, so that tries to push the fire towards the northeast, and that whole section of the fire is looking pretty good at this point. Now when it comes to that hot spot, again, some red dots showing up there, which makes sense because we could see some of that smoldering that we were just looking at right there. But overall, not all that much activity picking up in that section. Now, with that being said, it doesn't look like we officially have containment around there yet, but if you look very closely, you can see those red X lines, which represent all the completed dozer lines. So all over this area around Forest Hill, and that's a big part of the reason that it stopped before getting into the Forest Hill community. Now right here, you can see this firing operation and all of these completed dozer lines reaching all the way up to Westville. And that is something else that you can actually see in the recent fire activity. You notice this huge sliver going up here. You could call it a finger. What they're basically doing is just putting fire on the ground purposely to clear out some of the vegetation in this area so that when the southwesterly winds continue to push this fire forward, a lot of the fuels right here have already been cleared out, so it hopefully just stops it in its tracks. Kind of the one worry there, though, is occasionally you can get a burning ember that jumps over a containment line or a firing operation like this, and then the fire is able to just bypass all of that progress that we made. That was something that we saw in the Dixie fire last year. So just going to be watching that to hope that that finger, that is pretty amazing how much they've put in there, but hopefully that'll just continue to hold as this fire continues to move forward. Now back to the containment map. Again, not seeing any containment on the eastern side of this fire or the northeastern side. Not a big surprise there because that's where the fire has just been extremely active. And if we just zoom in there, you can also see how steep and rugged the terrain is in this area. I couldn't imagine trying to get dozers in here, putting in containment lines around this. I can't imagine even if that would be possible. So I know they've been using some very large air tankers in this area just to drop some retardant lines to try to stop the fire in its tracks right there. Now, we also see on watch duty that we still have some evacuation orders and warnings. For that kind of information, you can go to Inciweb. I put the link for this in the description. And those two links right there will take you to maps that look like that, and you can stay updated with all the most recent evacuation orders and warnings. That red color is mandatory evacuations, where it means leave immediately. That yellow color is an evacuation warning, where good idea to start getting ready to leave. Now, if we also come down here, we could just see how many personnel are on this. Every time we look at this, it seems like this number just increases. We're up to 3,655 personnel on this fire. And then I also just wanted to read this line right here because it kind of sums up the weather forecast, which we're about to look at. Thursday, southwest winds continue, but decrease in intensity. Temperatures and humidity should be about the same. So how I think about that and thinking about the fire is today, that spot fire calmed down in large part because we had below average temperatures. Relative humidity was pretty good, meaning we had a lot of moisture in the air. And we did have some gusty winds, which is why we still had some hot spots showing up there. But it was especially those southwesterly winds that were fueling the growth over here, and especially around this part of the fire where we don't have all that much fire history, which means a lot of these fuels haven't burned in a very long time. And it's also about 97% of the state's in severe drought right now. So there's a lot of very dry, abundant fuels in this area, fueled by those winds. But what that was just saying is that we're expecting less winds tomorrow. So if we actually want to look at the weather forecast, I think the most important part right now is if we actually look at overnight hours, our relative humidity is going to increase to into the 70s, which is great news. Sometimes on these fires, your relative humidity will stay in either the teens or the low 20s overnight, and it basically just allows the fire to have very active behavior overnight. When all this moisture moves in overnight, it helps to calm the fire down and then also create some favorable conditions for them to put some fire on the ground to clear out some of the fuels, which is clearly something they were able to do last night with that big firing operation we have on the northern side right here. Now, sometimes it actually can work against us, though, because so much moisture can move in that when they try to put fire on the ground, it just goes out. So it's kind of that sweet spot, but overall, if you want a fire to calm down, seeing moisture moving in is always a good thing. So Thursday, Looks like humidity is about the same, just around 40%, which is really good. Again, that's compared to not long ago on this fire, the day that it really blew up. We had the triple digits in our relative humidity. I think I saw 13% on one of our weather stations here. So much more moisture in the air. Temperature-wise, still below average conditions, right around 70 degrees. So looking great right there. And then when it comes to winds, let's check out the wind gusts. Looks lighter than what it was showing up as today, although still coming from that southwesterly direction. So if I had to forecast growth tomorrow, I would say the most active part of this fire is going to be this section down here, which will still be pushed by those southwesterly winds and is an area of the fire that doesn't have any fire history. Now, with all that being said, I'm still going to be watching Forest Hill closely, but it looks like we have some great progress in that area, so hopefully that progress continues. Now, when it comes to the overall weather conditions tomorrow, I'd say we're looking pretty great. Temperatures below average, relative humidity pretty high, winds calmer than they were throughout the day. So overall, I'm expecting less growth tomorrow than what we had today, and today was pretty moderate. And then here is where potentially some of the best news comes in. I saved this for last because, it could be some very good news, but it is so far off in the forecast that we can't get it too excited just yet. But it looks like the first real rain of the season might be coming into California. It looks like it's setting up on Saturday night, some of that pushing into the Bay Area. Then throughout the day Sunday, looks like we actually get some moderate rainfall throughout the Bay Area, stretching down into the Central Coast. And then eventually it works its way over towards Tahoe, just some light rain at that point. But even so, best case scenario, it drops some rain on the Mosquito Fire. Unlikely that it would completely put it out, but it would certainly help. More likely scenario is that as this system moves in, it just increases our humidity even more, and then just continues all that progress that we've made on this fire over the last few days. So overall, hope this video was helpful. I'm about to record a 2-minute version of this video that you can also watch if you just want a more concise version. And then stay tuned for Wildfire Insider tomorrow morning, where it's a lot more interactive. I keep an eye on the live chat, and it's more of a conversation where I answer questions and comments, and we basically just try to figure out what's going on with wildfire in California together. So if you want to stay tuned for that, you can subscribe to this channel, and you can also follow Holt Hanley Wildfire Forecasting on Twitter, where I'll be doing more updates throughout the next couple of hours. So hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching.